As we examine the general slowdown of comics not being sold, and then basically having to restart again in comic shops, getting things out into people's hands, there's a little term that other industries use called customer acquisition that starts to really apply here. What is customer acquisition? Why does it matter for comics? And why is this probably the most important thing for publishers to be thinking about in the second part of the year? Let's talk about that. Hey everybody, this is Perch. If you've ever done business, you've operated your own business, you have your own small company or your a retail shop, whatever it happens to be, you've probably thought about customer acquisition, even if you don't necessarily use those words. Customer acquisition is basically the process and the money you need to spend in order to get a customer to come in your shop. Now, if you have a product that everybody just needs, like, you live in the desert and you sell water, it's a life essential good. So your need for customer acquisition is a little bit perfunctory. People are going to need water, so they're going to come and they're going to buy water. You don't have to go out and market that you have water. You just have to make people aware that it's there, and then your job is pretty much done. In most things, though, most people need to be made aware that there's a product for there to consume, and they need to kind of be advertised to, marketed to. They need to be romanced that this is a product that they want. And for things that have recurring purchase or subscriptions, or what in the tech industry you call it software as a service. In comics, you call it kind of the monthly pull box. You have a certain form of customer acquisition where your goal is to first attract new customers, make them aware of your product. Then you've got to make them aware of that it's a continual product, so they want to keep investing or keep buying. And then ultimately, how you hook them into a reliable revenue stream where you can count on them being a customer for 12 months, 24 months longer. Now, the publishers, by and large, have kind of ignored customer acquisition. They do basic marketing. It's what Free Comic Book Day is, but this is often brought out by other entities, and the Marvels and DCs of the world kind of just play along with it. But customer acquisition at this given moment is very critical, because what's happened is due to the virus, due to things shutting down, due to comics not being sold, what we have is a population that are learning to live without it. And a good example of which is when the shutdown happened, you didn't see a lot of videos, a lot of news, a lot of attention being given to how to find graphic novels, how to, Marvel Unlimited is a digital service where you can get a bunch of those comics. You didn't see a big Marvel Unlimited push of marketing or advertising. You didn't see Comixology suddenly, being aggressive in what they do. And part of the reason why you didn't see that from Comixology is Comixology had built its model on new comics, and with no new comic shipping, that kind of it's streaming service without new content. With Marvel Unlimited, there is a lot of content, but Marvel really didn't do much to promote it. DC did a little bit more with their DC universe and their basics, but generally speaking, you saw very little. By contrast, you saw a whole lot from Netflix, from Hulu, from Disney Plus, HBO. All the different, even things like Crunchyroll and Funimation were doing heavy marketing, because suddenly they had a captive audience that needed streaming service. They needed this content. You didn't see the same thing from comics. So what's happened is a lot of people have migrated to the entertainment they can consume, i.e. streaming services, and they've by and large forgotten about comics. There aren't comics available to be bought. And so there's kind of this assumption, and I hear it from a lot of other retailers, and it's kind of the crux of this argument against DC doing what they're doing with the other distributors, or with Diamond kind of doing what they're doing. You see a lot of kind of angst between the retailers and these entities, but they're all missing one point, which is, are the customers coming back? There's an assumption that they will, and I'm not sure that's a safe assumption. Certainly, many customers will come back. Some customers will come back. But if you look at the comic industry and you say, 25%, a quarter of the customers are not going to come back. They're just going to, kind of move on to other things. They're going to use this as the the excuse to break the habit, reduce their monthly spending. Or maybe just shift. Maybe they're going to say, a lot of these comics don't really matter to me, and so I'm going to move to just trade weighting the big stories that I hear about and buy less. I think it's reasonable to assume that we're in for a drop in core customers because we're not doing anything in comics right now to encourage new customers to come into the mix. We're not taking this moment to say, hey, are you bored? Are you a parent and you're having to teach your own kids? You know, it would be great for teaching kids right now, a subscription to Marvel Unlimited. Why? Because it encourages them to read. It's got a ton of content to entertain themselves. I mean, if you look at comics at this exact moment, or not the comics, but comics and the world. If you look at this exact moment, you've got a condition where there's a lot of reasons why these publishers should be reaching out aggressively to find new readers. People need things to do. People are holed up in their house. They need things to entertain themselves. They need cheap solutions. And so this kind of Marvel Unlimited subscription, as an example, is a complete no brainer for anyone. I mean, for companies to push. It's content. It gets people into comics. I would be pushing hard on the educational value of comics right about now. But this is all customer acquisition. And what we're seeing is there will be an erosion of people who break the habit via this moment. And we're not hearing anything about new customer acquisition from the retailers, from the publishers, from anyone. Now, the retailers are a bit hamstrung. They don't have new content, and in many cases, they're not authorized to even open up their stores. So they're limited in what they can do. But certainly, every retailer should be thinking about, what is it going to take to market, promote, buy new customers. And I use the word buy for a reason. When you think about customer acquisition, it's usually you spend money to get customers. In software, there's this math of if I'm going to get a new subscriber, if I'm Adobe and I've got Photoshop and I'm wanting to do this cloud version of it, I'm going to have to spend cash. I'm going to have to spend, anywhere from $1 to $5 per user to build this up. It's why these companies have customer acquisition budgets tied to marketing that can be, millions of dollars when they're trying to launch a product. I mean, case in point, Microsoft, for a lot of their services, when they were pushing Azure and the cloud to compete with AWS, they pushed the idea of we're going to have to spend a lot of money for customer acquisition. That's why big companies sponsor things in theme parks and other places. It's why when you go to the airport, you see these ads for marketing to businessmen. Here's something you need. So comics has to get their mind in the same game. They've got to think about customer acquisition, and it's a strategy and it's spend. So the strategy right now seems pretty obvious. You don't have physical comics you can sell. You don't have comic shops open. You're going to have to go for subscription services, digital offers that are going to get people to, buy now and receive later. That's the world you've got to be in. That's just being pragmatic. On the spend part, well, I mean, put it this way. Imagine a world where Marvel Unlimited, I'm going to keep using them as an example, but Disney has a desperate need with Disney Plus and other things to get into the education space, to get some content out there and tap into that market. You've got a bunch of parents who can't send their kids to school. School is shut down. You've got probably a lot of streaming services that are being tapped. You've got this desire of hey, is this stuff just goo that's going into the kids' brains? They're not teaching them, they're not educating, they're not building anything up. So what do we do for acquiring those? What do we do to market something that is helpful? Well, again, like I mentioned earlier, comic books is an ideal learning tool. You have to warp it a little bit, but the idea of saying, hey, it's still entertainment for your kids. It's Spider-Man. It's all the rest. Stop thinking for the moment that you have to make kid-friendly content or you need to speak to millennials or any of that kind of stuff. We need to get a YA author in here. Instead, go with, hey, here's the Avengers. It's 400 plus issues. This is going to take a kid a month to read all this stuff. But it's reading. It's a lot of dialogue. I mean, hell, Brian Michael Bendis is imagine the reading that you have to do there to start using that as a benefit. But market to parents. Here's something to entertain your children. It's going to provide some reading comprehension. And it's cheap monthly subscription. I mean, that's Get your kids into comics, help teach them read. DC and Marvel and even some of the independents did this in the past where they talked about comics have some benefit. And even within the comic industry, we often like to overthink it. We talk about, well, parents probably don't want that, comics code authorities. There's some content in there that's not appropriate for kids. It's, there's the whole. I heard somebody say the other day, it's like, oh, there's a lot of parents who still worry that comic books are a gateway to Satan. I'm like, I mean, nobody's worrying about that. Nobody sane is worrying about that today. In the 70s and the 80s, sure. Today, no. And again, you're competing with Netflix, you're competing with Hulu and Disney Plus. So you're saying that somehow you think comic books are going to be more destructive, more worrisome as a parent than showing them, Marvel movies or Avengers movies, or God help them if you haven't set up a kid account on Netflix. Who knows what's there. Um, there's no reason why comic books can't play in that space and tap into that. We will teach reading and comprehension. It's there. This is how you acquire an audience, a new audience. And comic book publishers, retailers, distributors, everybody needs to start thinking about customer acquisition as things pick back up, as opposed to just saying, oh, the doors are open, everything goes back to normal. As I've said before, I think we're looking at about a 20% drop in customers out there when this thing opens up. I think 1 in 5 are going to go off and do other things. That's a big number, but I think it's an accurate number. So we have to start thinking about many different places to play. But that's what customer acquisition is. That's why it matters so much, and that's why everybody needs to get their head around it. So what do you think? What are some ideas to acquire new customers? Does it matter? Do you think everybody's just going to come back to comics? Life is peachy good. Leave your comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, I would appreciate it if you would. Otherwise, introduce to a friend. Would love to have a bigger audience here. I won't say as much. I'm working on that. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.